View gives you another perspective. I love the pressure of being live. I feel like we're doing a job that matters.
You're live with Lucy Hockings on BBC World News.
This is BBC News. I'm Ben Brown, reporting live from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Our headlines. NATO warns the West must prepare for the long haul here in Ukraine. It comes as Russia confirms that it fired missiles into this city last night, killing a journalist who worked at Radio Liberty.
The first one struck
the programme. As pot-banging residents protest against the government-enforced lockdown in Shanghai, the Chinese authorities defend their zero-COVID policy, calling it... Hello, welcome to the programme. Russia has confirmed it attacked Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, yesterday, but says it was targeting a missile manufacturing plant. Let's go to Ben Brown in Kyiv.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. He had just finished a meeting here in the Ukrainian capital with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, we heard the explosions from our rooftop position here in Kyiv, and very shortly afterwards, we interviewed were launched from a submarine in the Black Sea. Meanwhile, an aid organisation has said that it believes 2 British volunteers providing humanitarian assistance here in Ukraine have been captured by the Russian military.
The first one struck on that side. It was really loud. I thought it fell somewhere near my office. After about 10 seconds, a second one hit. Here. I then realised this one was even closer.
They've killed so many.
Is that it happened while the Secretary-General of the United Nations was in Kyiv just a couple of miles away. According to Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of the city, Moscow was sending a message.
This
Sides say they want a diplomatic solution, but after the events of yesterday, that feels as far away as ever. Joe Inwood, BBC News, Kyiv.
Well, we can talk now live to Alexandra Taylor, who's Chief of Media Relations in Europe, and she joins us from Vienna. And just tell us, you were very active, the OSCE, here in Ukraine in a kind of monitoring role, but because of the war, you've been forced out. I mean, just tell us, what is the latest situation with regards to the OSCE here in Ukraine?
Yes, indeed. We had the special monitoring to Ukraine present there for the past 8 years. It was our largest field operation charged with transparently observing and reporting on the security and humanitarian situation. 1,300 mission members, with a great deal of them working in the Donbass area. We conducted those tasks using multinational teams of civilian unarmed monitors, and they would report daily on the security situation for the past 8 years.
And you were saying you were the eyes and ears of the international community. So in a sense, you're saying really the world has lost something by you having to leave this country.
We evacuated them and relocated national staff. So indeed, we don't have that mechanism in place anymore. We continue to have another mission in Ukraine known as the Project Coordinator's Office, who is working on humanitarian assistance. They're based out of Western Ukraine. Our largest mission is in the process of closing.
Any idea when you could be back?
That depends on the decision of the 57 member states. We only operate on consensus decisions, so they would have to come to an agreement on any new mission or mandate.
To coincide with his visit?
Absolutely. I think it just shows the disrespect that Russia has to the international organizations and to any agreements and deals that it promises to honor. Moreover, I think it also shows that Russia does, and I think that that is very alarming for the whole international community.
Do you think the UN Secretary General was able to achieve very much when he was here? He went to see Vladimir Putin, then he came to see your president, Volodymyr Zelensky. Has he made any
visit? I did not expect any real agreements or even humanitarian corridors to come out as a result of this visit, and unfortunately the reality proves that.
What is the latest on the situation in Mariupol? I mean, so many desperate civilians who are trapped there in the city, but also particularly in the Azovstal steel plant there.
It's heartbreaking and extremely, extremely difficult for us Ukrainians to watch how our defenders are doing their utmost to absolutely out.
NATO have said today this war could go on for years and that the West has to be prepared for a long haul. The West is giving more weapons, we know that. Even Germany now giving heavy weapons to Ukraine.
Still more that will be needed, and I would not want the West to think that we should go into long-term war. I think the more we are being backed, the faster we will be able to win and faster to regain our and the country to survive, to get them out from here.
But that means not just defending your territory, it means going on the attack to push them out of what they've got already.
That's going on attack on our own territory. I think it's about defense needed and munitions for all of this, because we have incredible armed forces, an incredible nation that is fully backing those armed forces and territorial defense, who are all united in trying to get them out. But obviously only human.
2/3 of the country's children are now displaced. For some it is an even harder journey because they don't have their parents with them. One children's home on the eastern front line in Luhansk had to relocate hundreds of miles across the country to the western.
She's been through more air raids than any 11-year-old should. The lives of these orphanage children are now dominated by running from war and taking cover from attacks. This is Lysychansk, Angelina says, reading memories of the town she was evacuated from. I want to go home. The more they shoot, the more I want to go back, she says.
We packed all our stuff. The manager was thinking we would evacuate to Lviv or Kiev.
Lviv it was, but even this far west, they're not safe. Vova's phone now holds videos of a missile strike nearby.
It was here on the floor. I was walking on fragments of glass.
Angelina offers a lesson in the attempt to redraw Ukraine's geography.
Workers, those aid workers missing here in Ukraine, they've been named as Paul Urey and Dylan Healy. The non-profit organisation Presidium Network says the men were providing humanitarian assistance in Ukraine when they were captured by the Russian military. They were detained at a checkpoint near the city of Zaporizhia in the south of this country on Monday. Now, we've heard from Paul Urey's mother, who's released a statement saying she's extremely worried about the situation. She also added her son is a diabetic and needs and bombing from the air, but it is also saying that it has inflicted colossal losses on the Russian military. That is the latest from here in Kyiv. I'll hand you back to the studio in London.
वही स्वाद नया अंदाज अमूल चीज ये मेरा चीज है
बीमार्क मस्टर्ड ऑयल मस्टर्ड स्पेशलिस्ट द्वारा बनाया गया करोड़ों द्वारा जांचा परखा आजमाया गया द मस्टर्ड स्पेशलिस्ट सिंस 1933 बरसों से
This is Impact on BBC World News. Now, residents have been banging pans and shouting from the windows of their homes to protest against the government-enforced lockdown. Closed down now for 5 weeks, and residents said they've struggled to get access to food supplies, whilst others have been temporarily evacuated from their homes so they can be disinfected. But despite growing calls for the Chinese government to alter its COVID strategy,
too much pressure on the system. If they eased up on zero COVID, the hospital system, but there just aren't enough people here vaccinated. The government has dropped the ball, really, when it comes to booster shots. Neighbourhoods. Now, tens of millions of people in this city have had 3 tests this week. Today, only 49 extra cases, and it's been the same the last few days. So it seems like we're not going to, for the moment at least, have a city-wide lockdown here, but whenever anyone's found to have tested positive, well, that area, that sort of community will be locked down. I mean, in the buildings you can see behind me, there are parts of the CBD currently locked down like this because they've been not only people's sort of individual well-being, but the overall Chinese economy. I think, I think it could just be complacency, that after having 2 shots, a lot of people thought, well, it's okay, and why don't... So that the local community can sort of get its rates up. I mean, I think for many observers, many scientists would say, well, whatever it takes to get more booster shots out there, because what a lot of people are asked in Shanghai is, instead of isolating...
This round of early morning clashes with Israeli police. Security forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse Palestinians who were throwing rocks and firecrackers. Let's get more with John Donnison.
Well, all morning, 100,000 Palestinian worshippers who've attended. Israeli security has been pretty high, as you can imagine, but a pretty relaxed atmosphere so far, and things seem to have been passing off peacefully. There were some clashes, a relatively peaceful scene here, beautiful day, but people will be watching closely to see whether things pass off peacefully in the next few hours.
John Donnison. Well, the authorities in India are warning that around half the country may now be
of Jaisalmer, which is usually known for its magnificent forts as a popular tourist destination, but is in the news for its soaring temperatures. Now, the heat does get unrelenting in this desert area, temperatures going all the way up to 50 degrees in June, but they have started climbing much earlier. Jaisalmer, where the temperature is either 43 degrees or more, which is substantially high for this time of the year. Now, people have been advised to stay indoors as much as possible. Some states have ordered school closures. Others, like Rajasthan, here have ordered power to open wells and rainwater harvesting ponds too, to fetch water on their heads, and they have to make multiple trips for that. So for those who have to step out, the advice is to wear cotton clothes, cover as much of their body as possible to avoid sunburns.
Divya Arya, neighbouring Pakistan.
Height, especially along the border area between India and Pakistan. Such severe heat waves haven't been registered in the region until the months of May and June, but scientists agree that climate change has sped up the melting of higher than what it is usually recorded in the month of April. According to the Pakistan Meteorological Department, these temperatures are likely to increase gradually, impacting millions of lives in the country and the harvest of wheat as well, especially at a time of the heat increases. The public has been advised to stay indoors and avoid unnecessary exposure of sunlight.
Sad to hear there. That's it for now. Bye. Bye.
Hello. Out here, but we are pretty much in the hottest time of the year. It's the pre-monsoonal heat that's building across the subcontinent, and in fact heat wave conditions across many areas of India and into Pakistan as well. But of course, in some spots the temperatures are even higher than that. They could be approaching 48, 49 degrees Celsius, and lots of very warm weather stretching into Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan as well. Temperatures in Tashkent in excess of.
Follow the world's top golfers via the BBC Sport website and app. To get live text updates, news, analysis and the golf calendar.
The mustard specialist since 1933. Barso se sarso.
खुश है ये आसमां ज़मीन हर तरफ छाए हैं हम ये ऐसी.
Millions of years of rifting, making far feel close. bringing there to here. Turkish Airlines.
How worried is the WHO?
We really need to focus on bringing transmission
Every day. The reason you haven't divorced is that you simply can't afford it. You're right about that. Hard Talk, this week on BBC World News.
For 40 years, this statue behind me has stood as a monument to friendship between Ukraine and Russia.
Contempt for global institutions. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden has asked the US Congress for $33 billion in extra funding for Ukraine. He said the money was designed to defend Ukraine, giving military, economic and humanitarian assistance rather than to attack Russia. Marketing practices to promote their products in violation of international commitments to protect breastfeeding.
Now on BBC World News, the latest business news from
Hey, it's a missed delivery. Amazon shares slump as the pandemic online shopping boom starts to... Hey, hello everybody, I'm Aaron Heselhurst. Welcome to the World Business Report. Give me about 10 minutes and I'll try to give you a fascinating snapshot of all the latest in the world of business and money. Let's get cracking. We're going to start with Amazon. That's because shares in the e-commerce giant, they're falling. Driven by a huge hit from its investment in the electronic car maker Rivian. Let's jump straight over to New York to our very own Michelle Fleury joined us. Michelle, lovely to see you. Happy Friday, Michelle. Hey, you know, Michelle, just when we thought that online is the only way to go as a retailer, consumers all around the world.
I mean, absolutely. Look, if you think back to lockdown periods during the pandemic, a lot of people were stuck at home because of lockdowns and were shopping online. Now there are a couple of factors at play here going ahead, and that's where the inflation picture comes in. On the one hand, you've got consumers looking at higher prices. On the other hand, they're also able to shop again in person. And so you take these two things combined, and that basically is weakening the outlook for this mammoth
operations, which is AWS it's called. And that's a big part. I mean, that part of the company is where it makes a huge chunk of its money.
Yeah, and that benefits from this kind of hybrid working where we're kind of, you know, switching between working in the office and working. That sector is doing well for the company.
Yeah, so I just said, just before I popped on air here, I was looking, Chevron shares, say that 3 times, Chevron shares have slipped, but despite a staggering profit number.
The war between Russia and Ukraine, that has pushed up the price of Brent to around $140. It's since fallen back to around $100 a barrel. But that increased price is boosting the profits of the oil majors, Chevron reflecting that. But I guess they're not.
To satisfy the US that its inspectors will get the full access to audit papers required by laws passed under the Trump administration. The talks, they're all aimed at preserving the 261 Chinese firms on the markets in New York, in the US, as well as encouraging of these Chinese companies that are on the markets in New York.
Absolutely, Aaron. Well, it's a long-running dispute, and it has some, you know, solid grounds. There have been cases of Chinese companies floating on the New York Stock Exchange, which, shall we say, rapidly climbed to 50 and then collapsed. And just last month, Luckin was finally paid up 189 million, I think, for as a fine for accountancy fraud. So cases like that, where to delist if they don't come into compliance. So the negotiations have reached this rather kind of critical moment.
And as you just said, I mean, Beijing's always insisted this is about national security. So how do they balance that with also showing that they...
The question of national security has just risen up the agenda in all sorts of walks of life where you wouldn't expect it to, you know, to be a salient feature. And you may remember the Didi Chuxing case, more than a year leaking outside of China. So there are all manner of regulations which seek to restrict the access to data for any international organization, including the stock exchange. At the same time, the Chinese economy is so capital can still move, and maybe that would be something that the Chinese authorities might prefer.
Well, let's watch this space. I'm running out of time. Thanks, Isabel. Always great to see you. Have a great weekend. Isabel Hilton there from China Dialogue. Okay, to Sri
confident that our creditors, we will discuss with them, find a way to restructure it, and then probably we will gain market access as soon as possible. Again, very, very difficult for me to give a timeline. I hope and pray that it is as now. Immediately there is no breakthrough. I don't see anything right now. The ambassador for China in Sri Lanka had mentioned that it's not the most desired thing for the Sri Lanka to go for IMF. But on our part, we did not have a choice. We will Sri Lanka for a long period of time.
Hey, you can watch more of that interview in a special edition of Talking Business Asia, Sri Lanka in Crisis. It's first airing on BBC World News tomorrow, Saturday at 23:30 GMT. Let me leave you with these other stories. Tesla chief boss executive last year. And Airbnb's big boss, Brian Chesky, has said that the company's employees can work from anywhere, any country, from any home, wherever they want. And it's a permanent move. That's it. Follow me on Twitter at BBC Aaron. Have a good weekend.
बीमार्क मस्टर्ड ऑयल मस्टर्ड स्पेशलिस्ट द्वारा बनाया गया, करोड़ों द्वारा जांचा परखा आजमाया गया। द मस्टर्ड स्पेशलिस्ट सिंस 1933, बरसों से सरसों।
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता है इंडिया।
On the Belarusian side, migrants started throwing rocks and bricks and branches towards the Polish forces.
A week of commemorative events in honor of Archbishop Tutu is well underway.
You can hear the sound of shooting and explosions.
This is a storm that has now claimed at least 14 lives overnight. You had people rushing to their basements.
We break stories from more places than any other international news broadcaster.
This is BBC World News with the latest news and results from around the globe. Sport today.
Sentencing on bankruptcy charges in a UK court. He could face up to 7 years in prison. The 76ers call the shots in Toronto. We'll bring you up to date with all the NBA playoffs. And 2 whole sentenced shortly following his conviction for breaking British bankruptcy laws. Earlier this month, Becker was found guilty of hiding money and assets to avoid paying debts. Our reporter Jane Dougal is following the story for us and joins me now in the studio. Jane, good to see you. Just remind us how we got to this stage then.
Failing to declare a property in Germany and concealing almost £700,000 worth of debt. Boris Becker's German, but he's lived in the UK since 2012, and he told the jury that his career earnings of £38 million had been spent on a jail sentence of a maximum of 7 years for each count. He could also be given a suspended sentence. It's at the judge's discretion. But it is worth remembering that at the start of the trial, the judge told the jury to ignore the fact that Becker was a...
Now, Manchester United's interim manager Ralf Rangnick will become Austria's new national coach at the end of the season. Rangnick has confirmed he'll combine his new role with a consultancy position with United next season. The club are on course for their worst points tally
this season with any type of positivity.
The British Football Writers Association has just named the winners of their Footballer of the Year awards for this season. The men's winner is Liverpool forward Mo Salah, who previously won it back in 2018. The Egyptian is having a remarkable campaign, scoring 22 goals and contributing 30. When Philadelphia started piling on the points, Tyrese Maxey contributed with this 3-pointer here. And Joel Embiid then showed just how important he is to the team at the moment. Top scoring with 30.
We were pushed because of them, and I thought that was great.
Well, over in the Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns also made it through to the second round. They too clinched a 4-2 series win after beating the New Orleans Pelicans 115-109. Chris Paul is in great form. He led the way with place in Las Vegas later. Trayvon Walker was the first pick on Thursday. He's heading to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags used their first pick to select the 6'5" defensive lineman. A second pick went to the Detroit Lions, who've acquired defensive end Aiden Hutchinson from at the 20th spot by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, staying in the US, the countdown continues ahead of Saturday's big fight in New York. History will be made when Ireland's Katie Taylor puts her undisputed world lightweight title and her unbeaten record on the line against
just the best female boxing match in the world right now, but probably the best fight you can see right now, male or female.
No matter what happens Saturday night, I think the real winners are the fans and women in general in the sport of women's boxing, because it's
rest of the field. And there were also 2 holes in one on Thursday. This is Kiridesh Afibanrat. He and Scott Gutschowski both aced the par 3 fifth. There we go. We'll see you soon.
I proposed a vaccine which is offered routinely in wealthier countries. I first became aware of this new coronavirus in early 2020. This has been such a fast-moving story and was relentless. Some of the images I've seen, Bowler's medical editor, to put that clearly and succinctly for the audience. It is hard to overstate just how important this vaccine could be. It was always clear that vaccines would be our route out of the pandemic. So it is science we have to thank for giving us this route out of the pandemic. Coronavirus is going to be with us for years and years. We're going to have to learn how to live with it, but hopefully we'll not see our
travel show, sponsored by Turkish Airlines.
So I'm here on the canal this morning, starting my trip. They say the biggest fish market is here on the corner, and I must visit right now. So the biggest market, the biggest fish market here in Igombo.
They are throwing a lot of the plastic and polythene bags, something like that.
So going out of the market, want to see. I see a little waterway, mangroves, to go somewhere inside, you know. Middle of nowhere. I think I have a little crack here, I don't know. Something unexpected have just happened, and yeah, I have lots of water in my boat. Don't want to feel them for sure, and it's getting completely dark now soon. Probably will not manage to reach the place with any kind of light. I have a torch. So now remains to just keep going.
Every weekend on BBC World News.
The Travel Show, sponsored by Turkish Airlines.
This is BBC News. I'm Ben Brown here in the Ukraine Long Haul here in Ukraine. It comes as Russia confirms it fired missiles into this city last night, killing a journalist who worked at Radio Liberty.
The first one struck on that side. It was really loud.
The Ukrainian government says it's hoping to evacuate civilians who are trapped in a huge steel plant in the city later on today.
I'm Geeta Gurumurthy here in London, also on the programme. Welcome to the programme. Russia has confirmed it attacked Ukraine's capital Kyiv yesterday, saying it was targeting a missile manufacturing plant. Let's go live to Ukraine.
With President Volodymyr Zelensky when those missiles came into the city centre. Now, we heard the explosions from our rooftop position here, and shortly afterwards we spoke to the Secretary General himself. He told me that he was shocked. Volunteers providing humanitarian assistance here in Ukraine have been captured by the Russian military near the city of Zaporizhia. They've been named today as Paul Yuri and Dylan Healy. Our correspondent Joe Inwood here in Kyiv has
targeted by Russian missiles for 2 weeks.
The first one struck on that side. It was really loud. I thought it fell somewhere near my office. After about 10 seconds, the second one hit.
I can't anymore.
Russia says it was targeting a missile production facility. 4 people were hospitalized and 1 woman was killed.
What's most extraordinary about this attack is that it happened while the Secretary General of the United Nations was in Kyiv just a couple of miles away. According to Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of the city, Moscow was sending a message.
This is the hello to.
But so far, even the diplomatic might of the UN has failed to achieve a breakthrough. NATO is now warning this conflict could last for years. All sides say they want a diplomatic solution, but after the events of yesterday...
People from Mariupol, is there any more news on that, any progress on that at all?
I think this is one of those situations where we will believe it when we see it. We've heard so many times about humanitarian conflict, as it has been every single time.
And let's just focus on the situation militarily in the east of this country, the eastern front, if you like, in Donbass. You've been there in the last few days, and I know that the
to a second, more attritional stage of the conflict. Here we're talking about trenches, and the Russians are resorting to their kind of usual modus operandi, lots of heavy artillery, lots of rocket barrages, and as you say, they are inflicting casualties on the Ukrainians. They are making strategic withdrawals, that allows them to avoid some of the casualties, and as you say as well, they are inflicting very heavy losses on the Russians when they try to come through their positions, and with counter-artillery barrages as well. But this is a different phase of the conflict. It's a grind.
Thank you very much indeed for being with us. What is your assessment of this conflict now? Because NATO have been saying that the West should prepare for a long haul here, possibly even years.
Oh, definitely we should prepare for all possible eventualities. Preparations should be in place. We can't predict the future. So we need to think about the range of possibilities and plan for all of those eventualities. That's just basic good practice.
What's your assessment, though? We were just talking to Joe.
Well, it's been really heartening as to how much firepower Ukraine has been able to withstand. And I think that we would be foolish to imagine that they will not give everything they have to being able to do that for in every people and killed a journalist. Is really very shocking. We're talking about a UN Security Council member, Russia, a founder of the United Nations, attacking a place which the UN Secretary General is known to be.
Ruthless in this conflict.
Well, it shouldn't be. The UN stands for something. The UN has a charter, and the charter is quite clear that there should be no invasions of this kind from one member state to another member state, and it's absolutely And aid, maybe also to think about doing that through by sea, through Odessa. I think that would be a very interesting and helpful thing to do. But also to use everything he has to try to end the corridors and the support for civilians on the ground. This is now an attack, essentially, on the UN, in a way, an attack on the UN Secretary General.
Mm. And just briefly, I mean, the Russians have talked about
such. This is not something which NATO has been, spoiling for a fight and trying to get in there to. It's the other way around. So I think we need to be very careful and not use statements like proxy war. There are big risks of escalation. We are hearing, and this is where we really need the good offices of the UN Secretary General, which I think now he's engaged. Okay, I would say. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Patricia Lewis from Chatham House, thank you very much for your thoughts. Earlier on, I also spoke to the Ukrainian, a deliberate provocation by Russia.
Russia doesn't have any red lines that it wouldn't be able to cross. And I think that is very alarming for the whole international community.
Do you think the UN Secretary...
Well, I do agree with many Ukrainians who believe that he should have made first visit to Ukraine and then will go to Russia if he had that in mind. But irrespectively of the lining, so to say, I was very skeptical with the
situation in Mariupol. I mean, so many desperate civilians who are trapped there in the city, but also particularly in the Azovstal steel plant there.
It's heartbreaking and extremely, extremely difficult for us Ukrainians to watch how our defenders are doing their utmost. Absolutely impossible to hold this last stronghold of Mariupol, and inability of anybody from outside also, from the international community, irrespective of many efforts, as far as I understand, to reach the possibility to get our civilians out.
NATO have said today this war could go on for years and that the West has to be prepared for a long haul. The West...
incomparable assistance to anything that we were receiving before. I think there is still more that will be needed, and I would not want the West to think that we should go into long...
out of Crimea.
You have to understand we don't have any other choice to survive. That's our only option in order for the nation and the country to survive, to get them out from here.
But that means not just defending your territory, it means going on the attack to push them out. This could last for years?
It will depend how much assistance and how fast and of what level of assistance we will be getting. Whether we will be getting the air defense we need, whether we will be getting the rockets of mid to long rail defense, who are all united in trying to get them out. But obviously, only human beings cannot do everything. So we need the instruments to ensure that our goal is achieved. I am totally sure that we don't have...
The city of Zaporizhia, that's in the south of Ukraine, on Monday. Paul, Yuri's mother has put out a statement saying she's extremely worried about the situation. She's also added that her son is a diabetic and needs insulin. The Foreign Office in London is said to be urgently seeking more information. That's the very latest from here in Kyiv. I'll hand you back now to the studio in London.
Ben Brown. That come, more than 40 Palestinians are injured at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque on the final Friday in the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
The same story.
Piece the story together with Ros Atkins, Outside Source on BBC World News.
This is Impact on BBC to access food supplies, whilst others have been temporarily evacuated from their homes so they can be disinfected. Today, officials reaffirmed their commitment to a zero-COVID approach. Stephen McDonnell has more.
We had officials here saying too much pressure on the system,
if they eased up on zero COVID, the hospital system. But there just aren't enough people here vaccinated. The government has dropped the ball, really, when it comes to booster shots. On the community, older people here, not enough people have had their third shot. So what they're doing is, well, in Beijing, for example, trying to avoid another citywide lockdown by locking down specific buildings, area that sort of community will be locked down. I mean, in the buildings you can see behind me, there are parts of the CBD currently locked down like this because there have been a couple of cases. So they're trying to be sort of very strict in localized areas, not only people's sort of individual well-being, but the overall Chinese economy. I think, I think it could just be complacency, that after having 2 shots, a lot of people thought, well, it's okay, why do I need the shots out there? Because what a lot of people are asked in Shanghai is, instead of isolating people in these enormous hangars, these quarantine centres, instead of the mass testing, why don't you put all that effort in?
Strand of early morning clashes with Israeli police. Security forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse Palestinians who were throwing rocks and firecrackers. John Donaldson reports.
Well, all morning, tens of thousands of Palestinian worshippers who've attended. Israeli security has been pretty high, as you can imagine, but a pretty relaxed atmosphere so far, and things seem to have been passing off peacefully. There were some clashes overnight, but relatively to, they say, Palestinians throwing rocks and fireworks down towards the Western Wall, where, of course, Jews go to pray. So, as I say, at the moment, a relatively peaceful scene here, beautiful day, but people
have risen to 45 degrees in some places. Divya Arya has more from Rajasthan.
The heat is scorching here. We are in the middle of the Thar Desert in the city of Jaisalmer, which is usually known for its magnificent forts as a popular tourist destination of the year. Now, people have been advised to stay indoors as much as possible. Some states have ordered school closures. Others, like Rajasthan, here have ordered power cuts up to 4 hours in industrial establishments and in rural households. Now, that is a huge problem.
UK insolvency laws. He could face up to 7 years in prison. Becker was accused of hiding millions of pounds worth of assets, including 2 Wimbledon trophies, to avoid paying his debts after going bankrupt in 2017. He was found intended for the programme to be his final destination. I'm on Twitter if you'd like to get in touch. Thanks very much for watching. We're back with the headlines in a few minutes. Bye.
Just a few storms breaking out here, but we are pretty much in the hottest time of the year. It's the pre-monsoonal heat that's building across the subcontinent, and in fact heat wave conditions across many areas of India, Tashkent, in excess of 30 degrees Celsius. And you can see once again India, lots of clear sunny weather on Saturday, but to the south we've got these pre-monsoonal showers affecting areas of Kerala, Tamil Nadu perhaps, and far north of India. Now, Mumbai will keep the sunshine. Here temperatures will be around the low to mid-30s in the coming days. Elsewhere in Karachi, it's the high 30s, so some very hot weather to come over here. That's it. Bye-bye.
Text updates. Go online or download the app now.
Advocate for pay equity and turn jobs into careers. HR empowers others to not only dream of change, but to create it. The actions of a few affect the lives of many. Join SHRM's global HR community to make monumental impact and cause the effect you wish to see in the workplace today.
People see that in the book, that it's about our shared humanity.
Every time I think about what he saw and what he went through, it makes me feel so sad. You just want to make the painting for him. Sorry.
This is BBC World News. The headlines say around half the country is facing a heatwave even before summer officially starts. The mercury hit 51 degrees Celsius in the Rajasthan town of Falodi, the highest temperature ever recorded on the continent. Authorities in Beijing are rolling out mass COVID tests, closing gyms, malls.
Now on BBC World News, Hard Talk asks tough questions in interviews with people who are shaping the news.
Welcome to the world of work. How should employees respond? Well, my guest is Frances O'Grady, the General Secretary of Britain's Trades Union Congress. Whatever happened to the power of organised labour? Frances O'Grady, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
You've had almost a decade at the top of the Trades Union Congress. For much of that time, you've been seen to say that the trade unions are about to take the gloves off when it comes to relations with employers.
Well, I favour workers getting a fair deal, and clearly unions are about trying to negotiate fair pay, won't compromise, won't listen. Then it's important that workers have that internationally recognised right to withdraw their labour, and if that's what it takes, I'm afraid that's what we have to do.
It does seem as though something is shifting. I just look at the figures over that far outstripped the numbers before the COVID pandemic. Are you now in a new era of conflict?
I think we're seeing an appetite from workers to make sure that their wages at least keep pace with inflation. And in the UK, organised and saying, you know, we want a fair deal. We know that it's not wages that are driving inflation, it's global energy prices, and we need action on that front, a windfall tax perhaps on some of those energy companies.
They want their wages to at least try to keep up with that. But I'm just looking at some strikes that have yielded major pay rises in different parts of the UK in the recent past. In the south of England, a 19% plus rise was eventually given to refuse workers. A distribution centre for a big retailer, there was ultimately, after a dispute, a near 11% rises. Businesses say they simply can't afford that level of rise.
Well, they clearly could, because they agreed it. And, you know, I think it's a positive thing that workers are getting organised and more confident about asking for a fair share of the wealth that they produce.
Insurance, which they're going to have to pay on their payroll. They've got massive pressures, and then the workers are coming and say, we want 15, we want 19%. That's just unrealistic, isn't it?
Well, not unrealistic if the company is agreeing it with those workers. And in fact, I covered the basics. And I think what we have seen is the longest squeeze on living standards that we've had in 2 centuries. We've already had 10 years of austerity where wages were being frozen at best, cut in.
People with long memories, older folk like me, might remember the wage price spirals of the 70s and early 80s.
Very, very long way from that.
Are we really? Because you said to me, oh, of course, well, you know, our inflationary pressures are nothing to do with rising.
Cut anymore. It shouldn't be the case that key workers who got us through the pandemic are visiting food banks, for goodness sake. Something has gone desperately wrong.
So when the Governor of the Bank of England, a rather important voice in the economy, Andrew Bailey's right, how did you feel about that?
I think the Bank of England corrected their position subsequently and talked about profits too, shareholders too. And I think, you know, it's born of a kind of price for all these crises every single time. Then that sucks demand out of local economies, and that's not good for economic growth.
We, as you have already mentioned, we're also talking about the context of an extraordinarily difficult 2 years of the pandemic, thanks to the furlough scheme.
Well, the furlough scheme, of course, was a great union idea, and I was pleased at the time that we got...
You were instrumental, but alongside business leaders, the CBI, and of course the Chancellor.
The biggest threat we faced at that point was mass unemployment, and that wouldn't just mean misery for millions of families, potentially. That would, you know, take the economy down. That was the real threat. So this was the first time saved 12 million livelihoods at its peak. So yes, it was really important, and it did succeed in avoiding mass unemployment, maintaining skills in the economy, and making sure that we could bounce back quicker than otherwise. Pleased to get, not perfect, but one of the best schemes in Europe.
But you have also said, despite being pleased that the furlough scheme was rolled out as it was, you've also said that there's been an inequality to the impacts of COVID, and that low-wage earners in particular have...
around the world, that, you know, whether they were nurses or shop workers or teachers, that people were carrying on through the crisis, going into work, often at great personal cost and risk, sometimes in the case of a real pay cut. I mean, it's simply not sustainable.
Is it your contention then that one of the lessons that we as a society should learn from COVID is that we should rebalance the pay differentials and redefine what is essential and also what is...
Key workers, people who were emptying our dustbins, people who were looking after us in the midst of that crisis. And I think it's only fair that they should be rewarded, not with a real pay cut, but with some respect and a proper pay package.
White-collar workers, interestingly, and actually one symbolic sort of area that's being discussed is the role of civil servants, white-collar civil servants working for government in London, whether it's time to require them to go back into the office and no longer work from home. Is it your contention?
I do worry about that class divide, about who can and can't work from home, but I think there's a lot more that we could be doing to make sure that every job has positive flexibility. For many workers, they want predictability as well of the employer and the union, who come to agreements on hybrid working, and it's not really, frankly, I would have thought he had more important things to be getting on with than leaving notes for trying to intimidate individual civil servants. It's often important for women as to whether you can even, you know, have the chance of getting to work, what happens in terms of affordable childcare, the hours you work and where you work from. But I think many young dads in particular that I speak to also want to play a much bigger...
Leaving the General Secretary of the TUC job at the end of this year. So it's time to sort of review where the trades union movement is in the UK. Would it be fair, would you acknowledge that actually trade unions are weaker?
Anti-union legislation. The last time they did it in 2016, it was about attacking that internationally recognised right to strike.
So is that your way of saying, yes, we are weaker?
Well, the legal framework is certain workers' bargaining power to get a fair deal at work. But the good news is that membership is bigger. We've grown for the last 4 years in a row.
Right, but you're still way down on where you were even 2 decades ago.
But we're going in the right direction in numbers, because they understand that it's only if we join together in a union that we've got a chance of getting
The problem is some people might not believe that. There's one rather symbolic moment just in the last few weeks in the UK, which I'm sure a lot of people who are weighing up whether to join is confronted in a parliamentary committee. Peter Hebblethwaite, the boss of P&O, said, "There's no doubt we were required to consult with the unions, but we chose not to do that. It was our assessment that this change was of such magnitude that no union would accept our proposals. So they consult with the unions." So I come back to the point for people watching. What is the point of trade unions today in the current legislative environment in which you have to operate?
It's not the first time we've had a fight, and we don't walk away from a fight when we are faced with some. We've even tried to cut their pay even further. You know, this is the race to the bottom that can only be tackled by governments stepping up.
Francis O'Grady, your words are powerful, but are you not in a way simply making money? He promised just a couple of years ago he would introduce new legislation to enshrine workers' rights. Well, time after time over the last 2 years, he's just put it back and put it back on the shelf. You've complained, you've said this is unacceptable, you have to introduce this legislation.
These are political choices that governments around the world can make. Look at President Biden in New York celebrating that breakthrough in Amazon. And the right of workers to organise and be treated with dignity.
For many years, I would counter that by saying, look at what's happening amongst young people. One of your own reports, I believe it was in early 2020, showed that trade union membership amongst young people aged between 20 and 29 is 4 The gig economy, as many people call it.
The gig economy.
Which many, to be honest, some young people say suits their lifestyle. And you, as a movement, seem to be so adamant that it doesn't serve the interests of workers.
I
And
disagree with you.
Maybe some young people...
In a mature way with those employers, but make sure that we're driving up labour standards at work across the piece.
Interesting. So you've got an agreement with
And
Uber.
more to come.
Can you wield leverage even with the biggest new tech?
United States, but you know, my goodness me, having a government on your side.
Well, it comes to
too.
something when the US, which for many years and traditionally is much less inclined to be union-oriented and membership levels are much lower, it comes to something when they're ahead of the United...
And I think some of those guys who don't want to see unions invest billions of dollars in union busting, I think their day will come, their time is running out, because we've got to do something.
Worker and employer, it's going to be between worker and intelligent machine. Artificial intelligence, you say AI is making life-changing decisions about who gets a job, who gets paid what salary, who gets selected for redundancy. And the fact is workers aren't even...
have to keep pace with these big changes at work, and one of the rights we're calling for is that right to a human review, because so often we see those big decisions being taken by software that has discrimination written in. We want the right to human review, and we want stronger equality rights.
And you want workers to have the right to refuse the next level of what many call surveillance technology, which looks at exactly how they conduct themselves right through the working day, and even
be this great liberator. It could take some of the drudgery out of work. We could share the benefits of increased productivity more fairly, but instead I think many people experience it as pretty oppressive and hardwired in. So we need to tackle that, and we need employment rights that give people the right to privacy, the right to switch off, and the right to a human review.
We're out of time, unfortunately, but to sum up, it sounds like you may be...
And for Rio, south of that, across most of Argentina, the weather's looking fine. The weekend starts off sunny across the Mediterranean, but notice around the Alpine region, certainly Switzerland, a fair bit of cloud, some rain too. Average temperatures generally, but in the north of Scandinavia, places like Tehran, cloudy at times, with a chance of showers. And the pre-monsoonal heat is building across the subcontinent. Heatwave conditions from India into Pakistan as well. In some areas, temperatures could be in the high 40s, so some extreme. Moving across Victoria and New South Wales, keeping things showery in Sydney earlier on, around 22 degrees Celsius, a fresh 16 for Hobart. And the weather's not looking bad at all for Auckland and also for Wellington. Bye-bye.
To the west, it's setting. But whether it's good night or good morning, we're in the midst of another day, which means you're never behind the international headlines. This is Newsday.
Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Ben Brown in Kyiv. Our latest headlines. NATO warns the West must prepare for the long haul here in Ukraine. It comes as Russia confirms it fired missiles into this city, killing a journalist who worked at Radio Liberty.
After about 10 seconds, a second one hit. Here.
Well, they've killed so many people. It's really difficult.
Heavy fighting rages on in eastern Ukraine, where Russians,
after being found guilty for 4 charges relating to his bankruptcy.
And in India, authorities say around half the country is facing a heat wave as it swelters in temperatures of up to 45 degrees.
Hello and welcome from Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. Well, as heavy fighting continues in the east of this country, the Ukrainian presidential advisor here in Kyiv has acknowledged, in fact, he said Ukraine had lost control of some towns and villages, but he claimed Russia's own casualties had been colossal. Russia has confirmed that it attacked Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, last night, but says it was targeting a missile barrage last night. We heard the explosions from our rooftop position here, and in fact we spoke to the Secretary General just afterwards. He said he was shocked by the attack. One person was killed in that attack, a journalist with Radio Liberty who was living in the block of flats. Humanitarian assistance here in Ukraine have been captured by the Russian military near the city of Zaporizhia. They've been named as Paul Yuri and Dylan Healy. Our Kyiv correspondent Joe Inwood has our first report.
Our brothers, thanks to them for our freedom. They won't leave anything standing. I can't anymore.
Russia says it was targeting a missile production facility. 4 people were hospitalized.
This is the hello to him. Mr. Putin has shown him a middle finger at this moment, shelling and destroying our houses.
It had already been a tiring day for Antonio Guterres, tearing corridors from the besieged city of Mariupol. It's hoped there could be some movement today, but so far, even the diplomatic might of the UN has failed to achieve a breakthrough. NATO is now warning this conflict could last for years.
In other words, a message to the United Nations, to the entire world, really. Is that how it's being seen here?
Yeah, I think it's worth reflecting for a moment on the extraordinary nature of this event. The idea that a missile was fired and landed not more than 2 miles away from where the secret member of the Security Council, the body responsible for ensuring world security. Of course, they're diplomats, they're pragmatic. In the long run, there's not going to be consequences for this, I think, or held against Russia, but it does say something extraordinary about Russia to the United Nations, and I think a lot of people are seeing it that way.
It was the first attack here in Kyiv for about a fortnight, I think, but actually the real fighting is going on in the east at the moment, really heavy fighting. And as we were saying at the beginning, I mean, both sides suffering.
Much more based on artillery and rockets, which is what the Russians, that's their default modus operandi. So they are bombarding Ukrainian positions with huge amounts of ordnance, and of course the Ukrainians are going to be sustaining losses as a consequence of that. But the Ukrainians are well dug in, they are well...
Heavy guns, isn't it? Heavy artillery to answer the artillery and the rockets that they're being hit with by the Russians.
Yeah, absolutely. This has become a sort of, there's going to be, they call it answering the artillery. So one fires out, the other one tries to respond with artillery of this war. It was the Russians whose supply lines were extended and overextended. This time we're fighting much more around Russian territory or towards their borders, and so the Russian supply lines are much more secure. The Ukrainians are more extended, and so we've seen these attacks that are making it harder for them to respond to Russian artillery.
The Ukrainians have been getting help from the West, of course, weapons, but they're also getting a lot of money now. I mean, Joe Biden, the American president, is proposing $33 billion worth of aid. That's an awful lot of money.
5 billion euros to Russia for their oil and gas. So while the Americans and the EU are putting money in to help the Ukrainians, the Russian war machine is being fed by selling its natural resources to Europe. And as long as that continues, any help the Ukrainians...
Secretary General's visit, she said it was a deliberate provocation by Moscow.
Russia doesn't have any red lines that it wouldn't be able to cross. And I think that is very alarming for the... but irrespectively of the lining, so to say, I was very skeptical with regard to this visit. I did not expect any real agreements or even humanitarian corridors to come out as a result of this visit. Inability of anybody from outside also, from the international community, irrespective of many efforts, as far as I understand, to reach the possibility to get our civilians out.
NATO have said today this war...
incomparable assistance to anything that we were receiving before.
Let's talk more now then about that Russian missile strike here in the heart of Kyiv last night because of that Russian missile attack. Mariana Drach is from Radio Liberty's Ukrainian service. She's the director of that and joins us now from here in Kyiv. When you heard this news, what was your reaction?
Each morning with Vera, she is our planning producer, essential for our work. She was in touch with our frontline correspondents. We planned events ahead of time, and this is absolute shock. And I still can tell you that
line, but I mean, she was just at home, and this missile hit her block of flats.
Exactly. She moved to her flat recently. It was her new pride that she moved to that apartment building, and she was dreaming of. She worked on a very important story. We will be releasing soon the last story that Vera helped to produce. It's about a woman from Mariupol that was able to fled this besieged city, and the woman, the Holocaust survivor,
being seen by the Ukrainian government as a deliberate provocation and a message from Moscow to the United Nations Secretary General, who was here at the time, and that is why the missiles were fired.
Exactly. Russian occupation, and Vera was extremely concerned about their well-being. They didn't have any electricity or heat, and they're in their 70s, 80s. So this is the life that Vera, like many Ukrainian citizens, faced. Coming back to Kyiv, including the UK embassy that announced such plans, and now people, of course, are shocked. This is exactly what you said, that nobody can be safe now. This is the feeling of extreme shock that we all share.
All right, Mariana Drach, well, we do send condolences for your loss and for her family's loss, of course, as well, just underlining the individual tragedies that are happening every day with this horrific war in Ukraine. That is the latest from me here in Kyiv. I'll hand you back to Seema in the studio in London.
Thank you, Ben. Stay with us on BBC World News. Still to come.
Almond butter.
बीमार्क मस्टर्ड ऑयल मस्टर्ड स्पेशलिस्ट द्वारा बनाया गया करोड़ों द्वारा जांचा परखा आजमाया गया The mustard specialist since 1933 बरसों.
But might these shocks to our system actually be a catalyst for positive change?
We have to wake up and we have to feed the world. That's a big job.
Can farmers, scientists and innovators overcome these challenges to protect the future?
This is BBC World News, our top story. As heavy fighting continues in the east, a Ukrainian presidential advisor has acknowledged Becca has been given a prison sentence of 2 years and 6 months after being found guilty of breaking UK insolvency laws. The judge in Southwark Crown Court told him he would serve half of that sentence. Becca was accused of Helena Wilkinson is there. Helena, talk us through the scene in the court as that sentence was handed down.
Well, I was actually reporting as that happened, but we had colleagues in Judge Deborah Taylor. Now, as that sentence was handed down to him in a packed courtroom, there are, you probably can see behind me, dozens and dozens of photographers, camera crews, reporters, many of which are from Germany. That bag, he nodded to his partner who was in the courtroom and had been with him throughout the trial. And also his son was in court, and he picked up his bag and he was led away by a court official. He arrived here, he had been acquitted by a jury of 20 counts, but found guilty on 4. And when he arrived here at court, he will have no doubt been very well aware that he was potentially facing immediate custodial. It has handed Boris Becker, the golden boy, once the golden boy of the tennis world, 54 years old. He has been sentenced immediate custodial to 2 years and 6 months, half of which he will serve on licence.
This is David Law from the Tennis Podcast. I mean, David, this is a massive blow to Boris Becker. I mean, talk us through what the ramifications could be here in regards to his reputation and his career as a broadcaster.
The expression golden boy was used about Boris Becker to describe what he did in the mid-80s as a 17-year-old, and he was the darling of Wimbledon's centre court, diving all over it, winning Wimbledon 3 times in total. He reached 6 Wimbledon, managing the rest of his life, particularly post-career. And he amassed $25 million in prize money, much more aside in endorsements. And, you know, he was not short of money. It's just that that money was going in all different directions in failed business ventures. He had some domestic situations with a divorce that meant that a lot of money was going in that direction. He fathered a child to be able to manage his life post-career. And then it started to snowboard, it appears, to the point where he was taking bigger loans and not paying them back and not, frankly, holding up to his responsibility. People will feel like that they don't sympathize with him. He deserves what he's got. But at the same time, it's really sad seeing somebody who gave so many memories put himself in a position like this.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there.
But I mean, I think nobody will ever forget what he did on the court, and his sentences for 2.5 years, of which half of that is going to be served in prison, from what the sentencing told. He's in his mid-50s now. I think that he's shown his prowess as a coach, so maybe there's a future in coaching in some way in the future. I don't think that this situation will mean that his tennis knowledge goes anywhere. Recent years may not be there anymore, but we'll have to wait and see, won't we, in terms of the fact that he is still a celebrated name from the past and remembered for what he did on the court. People do like listening to him, but you also...
...to 45 degrees in some places. Divya Arya has more from the state of Rajasthan.
The heat is scorching here. We are in the middle of the Thar Desert in the city of Jaisalmer, which is usually known for its magnificent forts as a popular tourist destination time of the year. Now, people have been advised to stay indoors as much as possible. Some states have ordered school closures. Others, like Rajasthan, here have ordered power cuts up to 4 hours in industrial establishments and in rural households. Now, that is a huge So for those who have to step out, the advice is to wear cotton clothes, cover as much of their body as possible to avoid sunburns.
Now, a reminder of our breaking news, if you're joining us, the 6 times Grand Slam tennis champion Boris Becker
Speaking out here, but we are pretty much in the hottest time of the year. It's the pre-monsoonal heat that's building across the subcontinent, and in fact heat wave conditions across many areas of India, which are even higher than that. They could be approaching 48, 49 degrees Celsius, and lots of very warm weather stretching into Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan as well. Temperatures in Tashkent in excess of 30 degrees Celsius. Here temperatures will be around the low to mid 30s in the coming days. Elsewhere in Karachi, it's the high 30s, so some very hot weather to come over here. That's it. Bye-bye.
Effect. One person in HR can challenge outdated hiring practices, champion modern benefits, advocate for pay equity, and turn jobs into careers. HR empowers others to not only dream of change.
Around miscarriage, it is starting to open up with things like this pregnancy loss exhibition. Having suffered several losses myself, I've been investigating why miscarriage happens and what's being done to improve care around the world.
Join me.
The big stories of the day. Reality check. Get the facts straight.
That claimed Russia's own casualties had been colossal. Ukraine's president has condemned a Russian missile strike on the capital, Kyiv, which came during a visit by the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. Volodymyr Zelensky said the attack illustrates the country is facing a heat wave as it swelters in temperatures of over 50 degrees.
Lively debate from Delhi,
where there is a constant scrutiny of our looks based on our body weight. So much so that unwanted comments on someone's body shape have been normalized in our society. So this week we are asking how to deal with body shaming. We start with a famous Hindi film actor who has delivered many social media posts titled "Way on It," which went viral. In this post, she says it would be a snide remark, an uncalled for joke, or simply an unsolicited piece of advice on what I should be eating instead of a dessert. I was
odd remark, and there would be that weird stare, or that kind of is she okay? What's wrong with her? And not in the most empathetic way, and not in the most graceful way. Like it was a little voyeuristic and strange. So I just noticed that. And sometimes I would talk about, no, this is for a part, and, this is not, I'm all right. And, this is not, something that I'm doing, or I have a choice. And this is why the sad part sometimes was that people just felt like they had a license to comment, and they just had that permission almost to just come in and say whatever they wanted, because to them I wasn't physically appealing. This is why I did the exercise I did.
Well, you've talked about these feelings in detail also, Nimrat, and I was going through your social media posts where I saw your photographs of before and after your weight gain. But what was the conversation? The high-calorie Indian snacks.
I'm guilty as charged. I really did have a great time eating everything as well. I was like, Nimrat, this is your chance. This is the moment. Go for it. Live your life. Live your fantasies. I used to have to, and that too had to come to, I had to arrive at it. The girl part of me, though, had problems. I had struggles. I wasn't fitting into my clothes. I had to redesign my entire wardrobe. I had to literally, I almost wanted to at all points tell myself that this is not Nimrat. This is Nimrat at work, So that was my way of making it healthy, and my way of not being uncomfortable with what I was doing. And there were not so good days.
But how difficult was it to then get back to your quote-unquote normal size, as you call it?
So I started working out and all of that. And then I ended up tearing my calf muscle. So recovering from that, it wasn't easy at all. I had to move houses, and it was crazy. That this entire time was quite a learning experience. You take your body for granted, and the things we do with it, and just basic activities like walking had become a novel.
Films.
I'd like to believe, in fact, since I have started working, which is now maybe 7 or 8 years or something like that in the industry, things have changed and shifted drastically and dramatically to something extraordinary to be on the big screen, and there were people who told me that, and I was, there were people who did randomly suggest plastic surgery to tweak this and make this, better looking. And for it, you're going to find it.
So, well, believe in yourself, but body shaming is real. How do you deal with that? So let's start our conversation on that note with 3 ladies.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. This is such an honor, and I'm looking forward to this.
look forward to knowing your story. We also have Neha Parulkar, who's plus size model, and she's a body positivity influencer with 48,000 Insta followers. Neha, I'm already a fitness expert and a mother, and a journey for a mother who was weighing 100 kgs after giving birth to her child because of also underlying diseases to get into fitness routine and also win Mrs. India Earth's title in
which is responsible, but there are multiple factors, and for girls, especially in India, we are raised to, listen to such comments since the time we are at our, adolescent stage and much earlier also. So feeling bad about yourself to feeling that hatred for your body, and it makes you all the more conscious about your own wellness and well-being.
And it's sometimes those little statements, right?
When I was growing up, I had zero confidence for the very reasons which you just stated, that I was always body shamed for the way I was. I was always bigger than the rest of the kids. And yes, there are a lot of factors that lead to weight gain at a very early age. It could be hormonal imbalance, and these kind of statements coming at you at a very, very early age does affect a lot of other factors in your life. You don't give yourself the benefit of doubt that you deserve anything better in life, and your identity is just revolving certain size chart. Then you are not included, or you're not accepted by peers or society or anyone around you. So that was pretty difficult for me.
All right, Neha, you mentioned about size chart, and Khushi, you did have a secret about maintaining.
Precise, and I think the way I coped with it was not the most healthy or positive way to deal with weight gain. I resorted to multiple measures that can be categorized as eating disorders, and it just became I had to sort of come up with solutions and tricks of taking it out and not taking in the calories, which is so harmful and so disgusting to think about, but it was my secret, and people that I'm not going to eat. I just didn't want to face that, so all of that happened as a result of that.
My God. Neha, what has been your relationship then during the time that you were struggling with body image, with food?
I could not literally eat anything. I was surviving on salad and curd the whole day. I had become so weak at a point where I used to not feel that enthusiasm of even going to college, because of which I was dieting at the first place.
But